A very good morning to all of you. We are going to start with our wonderful second day in a short while from now. I hope all of you are smiling. Can I see some smiles? Some nice bright smiles? Yes, lovely. I can see ma'am who's sitting right here. She gave me a bright smile in the, yay, of course, the Bangladesh team, always smiling. Great. India, no, never mind, but all of you are smiling. That's great. Bhutan, India, Bangladesh all sitting together. This is what we are all happy about. And we have another vibrant day today. We're going to be doing a lot of talking, listening, smiling, being happy. That's what we're going to do. And we're going to constantly keep thanking the universe because that's what we love doing. I hope all of you do that. Wake up in the morning. Thank you, universe, for such a beautiful day. You have given me another day to breathe, because I constantly keep saying thank you because breathing is so important. Being alive, breathing, getting a new day, this is what we love to do. And we're going to start in a short while, and I hope all of you are putting up your stories with the hashtags in our different, places that we've asked you to do that, in LinkedIn, on Facebook, on Twitter, on all over the place. I hope you've put up your stories. I put it up straight away yesterday, and I'm saying that I'm ready to take on the world, and here I am, ready to take on the world of people, world of beautiful humans, and I can see that all of you are buzzing with excitement about today. I will go ahead and mention about the sponsors before we start off. I'll quickly mention about the sponsors. The host state, Department of Information Technology and Electronics, Government of West Bengal. Data Center Partner, YOTA. Cybersecurity Partner, Palo Alto. Gold Partner, NTT. Silver Partner, CrowStrike. Delegate Partner, JIS University. Infocom, Changemakers. Award Partners, HP, Reddington, Sentinel-1, Dot1, and 4C+. Principal Partner, HR Forum, Adamus University, CIO and Security Forum, EY, co-host, STPI, session sponsor, Cybalt, Digital Transformation Partner, TCB Digital, CISO Session Partner, ACOPS, Hybrid Cloud Partner, SIFI, Learning Partner, Arch Global, Education Partner, SNU, IT Space Partner, Infinity, Spotlight Session Part by Ambuja Neotia, Startup Forum, Co-partner, NDH Go, Associate Sponsors, Tata Communications, Dhruva, DCC Services, Barracuda, Pinnacle Infotech, Sigrite, PowerGrid, Associate Partners, Teachers, HRFI, AdmissionTree.in, IEEE ComSoc, Community Partner, Infosec Foundation, supported by TAI Kolkata, NASCOM, CIO Club, SARC Chamber, Refreshment Partner, Jia Bharali Tea Cafe, and Radio Partner 91.9 Friends FM. We thank all our sponsors for making this event happen. Please don't forget to connect with us on Facebook at Infocom Connect, on Twitter at Infocom Connect, and of course the hashtags Infocom to 2022 and the Age of Changemakers and Changemakers 2022. We will start in a very short while. Yes. So a very good morning to all of you once again, and we start off with this second day, and I can see all of you are here. We'll start off with the power panel, building a successful organization, creating a winning mindset. And we have a very vibrant group of panelists and the chairperson and the speaker. I will call on the panelists first. Mr. Kulmeet Bawa, President and MD, SAP India Subcontinent. May I request you, sir, to kindly come onto the dais and take your seat. A big round of applause for Mr. Kulmeet Bawa. Good morning, sir, and a warm welcome to you, sir. Mr. Anil Valluri, MD and Regional Vice President, Palo Alto Networks. May I request you, sir, to please come onto the dais and take your seat. Round of applause. Welcome, sir. Good morning. Vishal Dhupar, MD Asia South, NVIDA. May I request you, sir, to kindly come onto the dais and take your seat. Good morning. Mr. Rajesh Rege, President, Honeywell India. Warm welcome to you, sir. And a round of applause. Good morning, sir. And Mr. KP Unnikrishnan, VP Marketing, Asia Pacific and Japan, Palo Alto Networks. Warm welcome to you, sir. Good morning. And our chairperson and speaker for this session is Mr. Bhaskar Pramanik, ex-chairman Microsoft and director SBI. Warm welcome to you, sir. A round of applause. The morning energy is good for this panel. And I hand over the session to our chairperson and speaker, sir.
Thank you. Actually, this feels like a Trump rally. It looks, the place looks very full up. But then when you actually look at the crowd, you don't see the crowds forever. But thank you for all of you for being here. For me, it's a privilege to be back here at Infocom. I participated in the first Infocom, and the last Infocom I attended was the Infocom in Bangladesh in 2019. So I've had a very, very long association with Infocom. Today's session is really about the leaders you see here on this panel. And the reason why the focus is on them is that because these are the leaders who have built or helped build the IT industry in India to where it is today. And I'm going to sort of share with you their contribution. All of them started their careers in India. They worked in multiple different companies. We've had the privilege of all of us having worked together in one such company, which is Sun Microsystems. Yesterday, when we talked about the fact that we live in an age of constant uncertainty, these gentlemen have been through that. And they've also been through that through this COVID period. Their leadership lessons and learnings is something which we wanted to share with a much larger audience. Most of these, their careers have been spent in building large product, technology, services companies. And if you go back 30 years, not too far back, 30 years, in the 90s, this industry was in its infancy. Demand for IT products in India was very, very limited. What was going well for the IT industry was the liberalization had taken place, and therefore the ability to import products was really good. Companies like Infosys, except for TCS, none of the other IT services companies were very well known or recognized. The multinationals came into India and they worked very closely with the IT services companies. They set up their GCCs, they set up the alliances, and the partnership flourished not just in India, but also globally. And these gentlemen here were part of that change which took place in the Indian industry. Yesterday I was talking to Kiran Karnik, and I asked him this question: what would have happened if NASSCOM hadn't been there? Perhaps the IT industry in India would have been like the automotive industry in India, completely, foreign dominated. But because of NASSCOM, because of the partnership and the ecosystem they created, including with the multinational, what has happened in the IT industry that we created a separate category, which is called the IT services market. And this IT services market is now flourishing globally, and it is in a category which we dominate. So these gentlemen here were the original workers, leaders for the $200 billion IT industry as we see it today. And that's why their leadership lessons is something which we felt was very, very critical for all of you to hear. So the structure of this session is that I am going to ask each one of them to share their lessons, to share their backgrounds, their lesson, the companies they represent for about 3 to 5 minutes, each one in turn. And then we will have a question and answer session where I'll ask them a few pointed questions, and then we'll throw open the session to the floor. We're going to try and keep this lively, humorous, and exciting. And we really would welcome a lot more of the audience participation. So the first panelist I will turn to is Mr. Anil Valluri. Anil is, it's been a long time. He's actually besides me. Frankly, I mean, if we were just counting the number of years of experience which the panelists have, it came to slightly under 200 years. If you add me, it will most probably be about 300 years. But Anil is the next most senior person. He's had long stints in DCM Data Products, in Digital Equipment Corporation, Sun Microsystems, and currently NetApps, and currently he is the managing director of the world's foremost cybersecurity company, which is Palo Alto Networks. So Anil, would you like to share your experiences and also your leadership lessons?
Thank you, Bhaskar. It's a privilege to be here. And under your leadership, this whole panel, this is deja vu. I mean, whole life I spent working for you. So, firstly, I'm extremely grateful and a lot of gratitude for getting into the IT industry by default. I didn't know when I got into my career that I would get into IT industries. I got a job and that was happened to be DCM, selling calculators and then computers. But little did I realize at that time there were only 3 companies in India selling computers, which is DCM, HCL, ORG and so on. Wipro came later. So, and that was the time it was a controlled economy, IBM and everybody was out of the country. So we had to do a lot of heavy lifting ourselves. We had to, in fact, I used to hold the code, source code for Unix system file release 4 in my drawer, that we had to produce our own Unix. We produced the CPUs, motherboards and all of that and make computer systems. So that was the start, and it was a journey that when the elections were just about getting into, the cephalogists were getting into the play, the railways were building out the railway reservation systems and so on. So from there the journey was joining the first multinational IT company, apart from Texas Instruments, which was not into IT. They were making chips. So digital was a big break for me, thanks to you leadership, Bhaskar. It was the really dream come true, because then you are participating in the actually IT build out of the nation. You are participating in the build out of railways, banking systems, telecommunication systems, internet, IT, ITS companies. We were involved in every one of them. It was like dream come true. You're in the center stage. You're in the forefront of doing a lot of these IT build-outs. And happy to be and grateful to be part of that journey. And then, in digital, then in Sun, it was all about promoting Unix. I think I will take some part of credit for promoting the whole Unix operating system and the Unix-based systems into the country, where we avoided the whole mainframe, cycle, and we had developed large systems, whether banking, for telecommunications, so on Unix systems, and that was great. Again, front row spectatorship for me. It has been working with stalwarts in the industry. Now everybody is doing great things, and you saw the evolution happening. And so, to my mind, and now coming back to the cybersecurity through the whole in between the NetApp journey and the Google journey and now Palo Alto, it's been always keeping pace with the technology, keeping pace with the trends, keeping pace with what customers are looking for. And to my mind, the core of success, at least for me, is all about focusing on people, right? People is the cornerstone, and that's the one which binds together the organizations. And leadership is all about driving the culture locally. You may have great culture abroad, and if you don't drive it locally, you could have a very different set of narratives here. So it's all about taking the culture and running it locally and creating that tone and tenor and walking the talk. So it's all about being openness, having meritocracy, doing things. Integrity, to my mind, again, has been very strong cornerstone, which got imbibed in the value systems from Sun, from NetApp, from Google, from DEC. That's the cornerstone. Do it with integrity, do it with passion. And finally, customers are at the center of every conversation. The reason why a lot of my successes have happened is because if you put yourself in the customer's shoes and think what they would be looking at you from the other side, you will get a lot of answers. It's not about our story to the customers, it's about customers' how they look at us. So people and customers, to my mind, has been the reasons why it has been a successful journey. And I thank God and thank you and a lot of leaders. Had the fortune of getting mentored by some of the finest leaders in the industry, and you pick a lot of good things. And it's not, you don't read it in books, but you have to practice it. So that's been one. I think the journey has been wonderful so far, and I continue to be, technology is all about life. Bhaskar keeps saying technology has got a life of a banana. It goes stale very quickly. So how do you keep pace with it? It's about, you should be interested in technology, you should practice it, you should really love it. And I am a technologist at heart, and while I find it difficult now to keep pace with it, there's so many changes, but continue to be at least, keep aware of what's going on, keep reading and knowing and talking to customers and employees. The last, I think I would give as the reason for why I've been successful is because of my people. So my mantra is simple: hire people better than you and you look good, right? You surround yourself with great people, all your inadequacies are covered up. So that's been my mantra. So have great people around you and you look good.
Thank you, Anil, thanks. The next individual I'd like to introduce is the gentleman on my left, Mr. Kulmeet Bawa. Actually, he's started his career as an army officer. He was in the Armored Corps for 10 years. And then he went to ISB to refresh himself, and that's where I first met him when I was in Sun Microsystems. Currently, today, he is the managing director of SAP. Prior to that, he was the managing director of Adobe. Again, two very, very significant companies. And, given his army background, I'd like you to share, Kulmeet, your story, and also the similarities you found, or the values which you incurred as an army officer, and how you brought it to fore in the companies you've led.
Absolutely. Am I audible? No. Hello, am I audible? Yes, I am. Okay, so thank you, and firstly, thanks for teeing it up so beautifully for all of us, Bhaskar, as always. So I don't think you would have ever underdone yourself, if I could say that. I also want to say something. Yesterday when we were at dinner, I've come to Kolkata after a long time, but I have some very fond memories, and I'm sure most of the people on this panel don't know. So I've spent a few years in Kolkata, some of the best years of my life. For those of you who are from Kolkata, well, I understand a lot of you are traveling in, and those were lovely teenage years as I was growing up. So I've schooled in this city, so there was a lot of memories as I was driving in from the airport, coming in here. To Bhaskar's point, look, here's the journey, very different from the Texas Instruments and everything that Anil spoke, but I left home early at the age of 16, post grade 11, class 11 that time, and joined the NDA, the National Defense Academy, IMA. So 4 years of hardcore military training, and then got commissioned, like Bhaskar said, into the cavalry or into the Armored Corps, the tanks. Somebody was calling me a tank commander today, earlier when we were having a cup of tea. But so I think those were the initial years in the army. And of course, in the army, I was in J&K. So I don't come from a technology background. I've always loved technology. I've always loved sharpening the saw, as I call it, on what's coming in, what the future is going to herald in. But I was not from a technology arm. So I come from a fighting arm. J&K for 6.5 years, and across, with the president, with a governor of a state for some time. So that was the army, and I think things were going very well. And for me, it was what next? I call it the what next syndrome very often. What's the next big challenge that I would undertake? So that was the transition into the Civvy Street almost 18, 19, 20 years ago. So that was the army piece, and in the corporate world, post that, it's been, so the first stop or the first halt was with Bhaskar and with everyone on this panel here. So it's so lovely that we are together again, sir. And so my best and biggest and perhaps the only mentor is Bhaskar. And thereafter, we were reminiscing last night. Vishal is the a guy who actually came down to campus when I was at B school to get me on board, got me flying down. Rajesh taught me everything about sales. Anil tried his best to teach me a little more about technology. And of course, Uni on marketing. So very fond memories coming back. So I did my stint with Microsoft for a couple of years, Adobe, like very different companies, very different learnings, very different cultures. But absolutely each one of them was a huge amount of learning from the way I saw it. So to Bhaskar's question, I think a lot of the fundamentals, whether it was in the army or outside, have remained the same. I could look good in front of media when they ask me, how was the transition and what did you learn? But a lot of the fundamentals, and I strongly believe that what we learn in the formative years as we are growing up sticks to us for life and comes out at various phases and stages of our life. But if I was to look at the top 2, 3, 4 learnings or the fundamentals that I've utilized, very similar to Anil, I think the first piece I would talk about is team building, collaboration, the power of people, understanding that it's always the team that wins, right? And I think that was ingrained into us in the formative years. So I could be as kick-ass, as good, the best of the best, the Top Gun standards. It didn't matter, right? Unless my whole team came back home at the end of a patrol or at the end of a... So I think that one piece, collaboration, bonhomie, camaraderie, I could go on with synonyms, and each one of them could be a 20-minute chat on what it means. But I would say that was the cornerstone of the way we grew up. Number 2, and again, Anil alluded to the same aspect, and what I've utilized over the last 18, 20 years in the corporate world, how do you build a culture of authenticity, of transparency, of what you see is what you get, rather than, you have a khatab and you've now become the Raja of something. And I've always believed that we get the opportunity to lead in order to serve, right? That's the main motive of leadership. It's not about the pips and the khatabs, I love that word, on your shoulders, but it's about how do you serve people. So building an organization which is authentic, transparent, where people can be themselves, I think has done wonders through my learnings over the last, and the last piece, without taking too much time, I would say is, to me it's been about how do you play for failure? How do you build a culture where you yourself and your teams and your people, the organizations are allowed to fail, they revel in failure, because to me that's where the actual magic starts happening. That's when you start thinking out of the box. You've got a psychological safety that you've built in the organization for people to think out of the box, to give their best of the best, bring it on board rather than worrying about, so almost like how do you celebrate failure time and again rather than coming in a boxed approach that this is life and this is the way we're going to lead it. So I'll pause here, but fantastic to be here again, Bhaskar, and thank you for that question.
Thank you, Kulmeet, for your remarks. The next panelist I'd like to call upon is Vishal Dhupar. I've actually known Vishal for many years. His father actually taught me how to play golf. But Vishal has had a remarkable career, both in DCM data products. He's worked with with Digital Equipment Corporation, then with Sun Microsystems. Then in his current role, he heads NVIDIA. How many of you know the company NVIDIA? Okay, quite a few. But NVIDIA is one of those, how will I put it, companies which works below the radar. But yet they are so critical for the future success of artificial intelligence and supercomputing. So, Vishal, would you like to share your leadership journey and also talk about a little bit about NVIDIA?
Okay, great. Thank you. And good morning. Mr. Mahapatra, thank you for getting us here. And congratulations for 100 years. That's marvelous. I think Bhaskar put it beautifully. It's not easy for anyone to get to that landmark. As I sit here, Let me talk about NVIDIA because he said many people may not know NVIDIA, but NVIDIA was all about fun and games, making chips and systems for video games. Then, one day, it became a little bit more serious business. All blockbuster movies, any medical device, and the world's most powerful supercomputers started using NVIDIA. And then came a really nice opportunity through researchers who figured out that our technology can be in the most transformative technology mankind has ever seen, that's artificial intelligence. Thanks to that, today robots can lend hand to us, cars can drive pretty much on their own, and most importantly, the earth can also have a digital twin. So what is NVIDIA all about? It's about tackling the biggest challenges, and that's why under the radar. NVIDIA, more often than not, at least when I joined, if I ask somebody, do you know about NVIDIA? And they look a little stumped, I would say, do you have children? He said, now I know NVIDIA. So it was all about youthfulness, and possibly the youthfulness because it springs youthful activities. We are a 30 years old company, transitioned from PC to internet, to mobile internet, cloud computing, and now to artificial intelligence. And our founders had certain insights which became the fabric, the foundation, why the company is what it is. And the insight was pretty simple, that we were at the beginning of a PC revolution. Everybody knew that $1 million computing will become $1,000. But they had an insight that it's wonderful to have computer on every desktop, on every laptop, but will we be able to survive? The first principles. Even through the scale, if I did computing, will we survive? And the answer was that if you do like everybody does, some will survive, some will not survive. So their first thing was to re-architect the way the computer processes information, and that process is called accelerated computing. So they formed a new way of computing that was called accelerated computing. In that approach, you had to refactor the algorithm, you had to relook at the applications, you had to work with the developer and create an entire stack. So our company became a computing platform company, whether it was for video games, then for movies, or for high-performance computing, and today for AI. That helped us to change the schema. What we did, what nobody else did. It was painful, it was long-term, but they say play the game, not the score, you will succeed. The second thing which they were very clear that if you really wanted to be in a position to survive for a long time, you need a single architecture. All of us come from Sun. There was a famous sentence Scott McNeely often spoke. He said, all wood behind one arrow. In NVIDIA's case, it was all wood behind one architecture called CUDA, initially called UDA, eventually called CUDA, Compute Unified Development Architecture. Why? Because developers come on install base, they require backward and forward compatibility, they require a platform that can expand, and they only go if it is easy to use. So CUDA became the de facto standard on which it was really built. The third insight, and this is a very interesting insight, and the insight was that let's work on a problem which is difficult to solve and can last long time. They picked up 3D graphics. And they picked up an activity inside 3D graphics called video games. A $0 market. There was no market for PC when they started. And the reason they did was that if you have a problem that takes generations to solve and you keep getting better, then you can bring the digital world closer to the natural world. So what God created, humans can start bringing it closer to that. And that gives you an opportunity to be there for a longer period of time. These three insights has actually helped this 30-year company to still look very young. Now coming to the youth. My youth was all about, unlike Kulmeet, which was hardcore military, mine was softcore military. I was born in a military family. It was all about safety and security, but there was one constant, that was change. And everybody faced constant change every month. You were changing schools every 18 months, you were changing friends every 18 months, maybe sometimes even shorter apart, and you were exposed to extremes, and sometimes you couldn't even come back to your pivot home, which was your hometowns, for years together. But the safety and security became my observation, that became my foundation in what I noticed. As a 25-year-old, I'd already worked for a couple of years, and I met somebody on lush greens. That was my love at that time, which was playing golf. I met somebody who's on this dais, more through destiny. And there was an instant request that I made looking at him. He says, where were you prior to this? And he said, hey, I started my career as a management trainee in DCM. Now I am the Vice President of Digital Equipment Corporation. I always came here because I wanted to have a position of strength before I was 40. That stuck me. What it taught me is that when you have audacious goals, those are the people that you need to follow. And his next sentence was even better than the first. He said, I feel that you can do it faster than I did. If I got it at 38, possibly you should be able to strive to do it early. Now it touched your heart. The next thing he did was walk the talk. He said that you need to go and meet my regional manager tomorrow. I'll get a call back in the evening. That time there were no mobile phones, so you'll call on landlines. And by the way, why don't you come home on a Saturday? Then I met a wonderful lady who's sitting in the middle of us, and two lovely children. And I was still trying to figure out what exactly is happening. But our relationship didn't end up in a job. It ended up in explaining to me the difference it can make to my life. It took me over 2 years to finally get onto the bandwagon called digital. And he said, I've brought you here to make a difference to your life. And the difference that he made to my life was to actually hand over an account called Hindustan Lever. I had few friends yesterday who were from Hindustan Lever in this room. And then came the challenge. And the challenge stated that as Digital Equipment Corporation, we are very, very well known for wax computers. We have a strategic relationship with Hindustan Lever, but you shall not be able to sell anything that is called wax computers. And by the way, that's the only thing we sold. And yet, being in business, I had to make sales. So yes, we did touch about Infosys was starting at that period of time. They were getting into system integration, but Digital Equipment Corporation, thanks to Bhaskar's leadership, we were doing system integration because we couldn't sell computers, but we were teaching people how to implement ERP, how to do structured cabling, what networking was. Anil walked with me many miles at times. We went from Ghatkupar to Sivri, and we basically figured out how a single backbone can transform computing and a role of a system integrator. So in my working with Bhaskar in my first chapter, it was about giving you audacious goals, but touching your heart. And my learnings prior to that about safety and security in a constant change became a way of my life. I had a chapter 2 at Sun Microsystems with him. And his difference was that it was not you alone in the system. Just like in the army, you're never alone. It's the full family. And uniquely, what he and Mitu did was they made the family the part of the family. There was never an opportunity where we worked and we went home and we didn't know about each other. We knew about our children, we knew about our spouses, we knew about our friends, and that's what was the network power. And that network power, that made the whole difference. And as you learned everything, then it was just about creating conditions which I had observed, which had got embedded in me, and then it was pretty simple because, once a trust is built, You can really communicate, you can really operate, and you can really act. But those are the foundational parts which I've learned through this journey, and hopefully, thanks to Bhaskar, thanks to my parents, it's been a wonderful, wonderful opportunity that I can sit in front of you and share my thoughts.
Thank you, Vishal. The next person, the panelist I'd like to call upon is Rajesh Rege. Rajesh Rege started his career in Wipro, and then he joined Sun Microsystems. He was posted in Bombay. We called him into Bangalore. He made a tremendous success about his roles. He subsequently joined Microsoft. In between, he became the managing director of Red Hat. He joined Microsoft. And today, he is one of the few individuals whose career took him in a completely different direction. Today, he is the president of Honeywell in India. And all of you can understand Honeywell is a 100-year-old company. It's primarily from the engineering industry. And they hired Rajesh to be the president of the company. Rajesh, I'd like for you to share your leadership journey and especially the lessons you've learned and how appropriate is this going to be at your new assignment as the president of Honeywell.
Yeah, thank you, Bhaskar. Privileged to be here. It's an honor to address such an august gathering. One of the advantages or disadvantages of coming so late in a panel is that all the interesting lines and interesting stuff has already been said, right? And only there is very little left for you to say after this. But for me, like Bhaskar called out, I made a significant pivot from the IT industry into Honeywell, and I will come to the Honeywell part in a bit. But my journey in the IT industry has been shaped by my stints in 3 or 4 companies. Sun Microsystems, which was a systems company, servers, storage, operating system. At the end of the 10-year stint there, and Sun got acquired with Oracle, I was thinking, what do I do next? And then I said, okay, I have not done any element of networking. And so there I moved over to Cisco. And after networking was over, let me do some software, which is where I moved over to Red Hat to run open source for India. And then since open source was done and dusted from my personal learning perspective, right, let me go back to the citadel of technology in one way, which is Microsoft, Azure, Office, etc. And then I realized that the entire stack of technology from servers, storage, networking, operating systems, cloud, pieces have been done. So for the next challenge, I decided that let me move on into a completely uncharted field, which is Honeywell. Now, the journey in the tech space, right, when you move from companies to companies and move from, one piece of technology to another, you realize that there has to be a significant learning, agility that is something that you sort of constantly keep alive inside of you. Right? When you go from one place to another, you need to onboard a new culture, you need to meet new people, you need to understand a whole new set of technologies. What you know from outside in is very different looking from inside out. So you need to spend a lot of time inside trying to understand products, solutions, issues and challenges, how the market perceives you. You go out there, you meet customers, you meet partners, you take on a role of a learner. Right? You find out who is the person who understands a given subject the best, and that person could be perhaps 3 levels lower in the organization, but you look at him as a teacher and you say, hey, look, I'm coming in new here, I do bring a certain set of skills and capabilities, but on this subject, you are my teacher, would you sort of invest your time and effort in trying to bring me on board? And I have done that repeatedly at multiple times. And, as I was sort of coached very earlier in my career, a good leader knows when to follow. You need to identify who people are, who bring, significant skills, capabilities and competencies, and then you sort of make sure that you learn from them and then you leverage them to drive the best results possible. So learning agility is very important. It is also important to have a growth mindset. When you move and transition from one company to another company, the culture changes, the expectations change, leadership, changes. So how do you sort of take the skill sets that you have and repurpose it into the new environment? What do you do to sort of try and create an accelerated impact in those environments? And that becomes, part of the learning agility that I called out, but also of a growth mindset. New place, let me shed the old baggage, let me keep the good memories and the good associations from the past, but let me figure out what can I do in this new space. So those are the couple of things that, have helped me at least, in the tech landscape. And when I transitioned into Honeywell, they played a very critical role. I'll come to that. As far as, learning goes over about 20-year period, in leading teams, in engaging, people internally in the company, externally, and cross borders, 2 or 3 things really, stand out. The first is that you need to really have, courage of conviction. You need to be able to be bold. You need to be able to, believe in what you do and what your team does, and go out there and execute superlatively. You may have successes, you may have failures. Successes will give you the platform to climb higher. Failures will give you the opportunity to analyze what has happened and what has gone wrong, and take lessons from it and course correct and move forward. The second learning typically is in terms of authenticity, right? Unless and until you bring true authenticity, and Kulmeet called that out, right? You can't lead people. People need to see you for your limitations, for your challenges, for the few strengths that you have. In a given team, there are other people who can do things that are far better than you can do. You are in a role to ensure that the goodness and the capabilities and all the strengths of the team, come together to bake that fabulous cake that can go and, do wonders out there in the marketplace. So you are one constituent, you bring some skills, but you need to be able to ensure that everybody feels recognized. They see you as somebody who is, quote unquote, a sort of a servant leader, that your role is to sort of energize the team, to bring them together, get the best out of everybody and try and drive everything. And this is a learning. When I was maybe 10 years younger or 15 years younger, some of these things were not something that were embedded inside of me. You learn it as you go along the journey. You sort of bring, new experiences to bear, and you shape your thinking, you shape your experiences, and you shape the way you are. You need to be constantly open to change mentally in your own thinking and the learnings that you are bringing in. So those have been some of my learnings on the tech side. Now moving into Honeywell. Honeywell is a completely different, pivot from the IT industry that I have spent a lot of time in. Honeywell is into aircraft engines. Honeywell is into process automation. Honeywell is into, driving sustainability for the planet. Honeywell is into intelligent buildings. It also makes switches and N95 marks and medical oxygen and so on and so forth. So when I sort of engaged with Honeywell for this role, the question that came up was, from my side, was, hey, I understand technology, and what would I do in a company as successful and as diverse as Honeywell? And they said that we will let you know later, but you first let it, pass all the hurdles that we have in front of you. And I did. And then I came on board and I realized that one of the advantages, one of the success mantras of a company like Honeywell has been its ability to innovate, constantly innovate, over a period of time, to create that spirit across the organization, to create the culture where people feel free to contribute, to come up with new ideas. And that is the reason why it has been around for 100 years. That is why people in the room, recognize Honeywell as a brand. It has transitioned from, being a thermostat company to eventually being an aircraft solutions company, because across the organization there is this belief that what is new needs to be onboarded, and what does it take to onboard and conquer the new is the spirit of innovation, getting people aligned and driving collectively in the new direction. And when I sort of recognize that in today's world, they say that everything eventually is going to be software, right? So Honeywell as a industrial powerhouse with multiple solutions also has, a strong software portfolio. It generates a lot of data across all the solutions that it brings. What do you do with the data? How do you analyze it? How do you do predictive modeling? All the buzzwords of today, AI, ML, etc., right? And my understanding of the software piece and the new world, right, was a piece that could add a differentiated value in the new company. And when I went into Honeywell, I realized that I need to be a learner again. I need to understand what the company does, what the purpose of the company is, what do I sort of, need to invest in learning, ramping up on all the products and technologies. But what are the few things that I can bring to this relationship? And those are things that typically, you do when you move into a new role. You bring customer relationships, customer centricity, you bring an authentic style of leadership, you try and, rally people around, you get learnings going, but figure out what somebody coming in from the outside, in perspective, so that people inside recognize that, hey, look, these are the opportunities that are being seen by somebody who brings a different pair of eyes into the room. And getting them aligned into new opportunities, new directions, right, are some of the things that, in the last year or so at Honeywell that I have been able to do. Sustainability is a big subject. Every day when you open up the newspapers, there is something happening on sustainability. Honeywell drives sustainability agenda for companies and for governments around the world, whether it is creating biofuels, whether it is creating, solar energy storage systems, whether it is creating a whole host of, new molecules that will create an impact on global warming, global, net zero directions, etc. Now, this is an area that has been personally close to my heart. But the ability to work with people who will shape some of these things, which will have a global, impact, is something that is very exciting. It is very energizing. It gives you the opportunity to play your part in climate control, in getting a collective, consensus going on what climate change can do and the solutions that are required to sort of reverse or at least stabilize that. So those are some of my journeys and my experiences. Needless to say, people on this dais and a whole host of others, I have had the opportunity to hold their hands and get their counsel as we progress through life and through multiple companies. Bhaskar has been a constant across multiple years in hand-holding me, especially in being a sounding board on career choices and how to navigate change and how to navigate the challenges of new assignments. So hopefully some of these resonate with people in the audience here. So let me hand it back over to you, Bhaskar.
So now, Unni, it's your turn. Unni is actually the youngest amongst the panelists here. And he's got a mindset which is heavily focused on innovation, especially in the area of marketing and marketing communication. For him, I think in every one of his roles, where he stood out is in terms of innovation, but also in terms of helping building the culture of his organization. He was with Sun Microsystems, and currently today he's the head of marketing for Palo Alto Networks, whose CEO you heard yesterday, and he heads their Asia Pacific marketing operation. So Unni, would you like to talk a little bit about your learnings around innovation and culture?
Thanks, Bhaskar. Thanks for the opportunity. And Kalida, when you sent me that note, it took me a blink of an eyelid to say yes to be with this team over here again. And Rajesh obviously stole my thunder about saying that when you come late, you've lost most of the lingo over here, which has actually happened. But I'm going to just pick up a couple of key threads, which I think were very critical in my learning. As Bhaskar said, we were in the industry when the industry was beginning to boom. And for most of us, we were there in the right time at the right place, but it did not come easy because while the market was picking up and the industry was picking up, there was a lot of education and change management that was required. And if I look at across a common theme, which I personally valued working with this team for many years, working with many of the folks over here, is the ability to resist, ability to challenge the status quo. It's the ability to be resilient and work when there's a massive issues about change coming in. And that's where you have to start thinking creative. That's where you have to start thinking disruptive because, many of the organizations that I've worked for in the past were sometimes early in their business or sometimes their products or lines of function which the market was not ready. And if you were in a situation like that, as many of us were, it was very easy to get disillusioned and say, you know what, the business is not going to take off, or it's a startup, or we are in a great technology and a great company where the market's not ready, so let's give up. And I think what we learned over the last many years is to how do you constantly challenge that? And our fundamentals or my fundamentals on many of those areas was you need to understand the business, you need to understand every single line item of what you're planning to do, think beyond the function that you are in. And the moment you get your grasp on that, that is when you will start understanding how do you kind of get newer things in. Whether it was things that we were doing in marketing, whether it was things that we were doing as a business, many a times the companies that I have worked for in this part of the world have done things which were beyond what the global organization had wanted. And I was always proud to say that I work in a company which has a global strategy but local adaptation, because they gave you that empowerment and that support to go and say, hey, you know the business, you come across as a subject matter expert. You are in that part of the world which we think you know better, go make it happen. And that leads to my other important point, which was our learning was all about culture. That will not work if you are the lone person trying to drive that. It's very important on how you build a culture where you're allowed to fail. You build a culture where you know the market is changing rapidly. It's about the agility. So you should have people who feel empowered to take the right business decision. Because if they think it's a job that they have to come in at 9 o'clock in the morning and leave at 5 o'clock in the evening, and nothing wrong with that, sometimes the problem that comes out of that is you're just doing a job. And my learning always has been that a job is secondary, it needs to be a passion. And whenever you are passionate about something, however tough the world is, however big challenges you have in front of you, you are able to break it. And even if you don't break it, because success doesn't come every time, you don't feel bad because you have made the right attempt, you've given it your 200%, and you also know that you're fleet-footed and agile enough to pick yourself up and get things moving faster. And you drive that with everybody in your team. And that again comes from a very strong cultural standpoint. I mean, the company that Anil and I represent is yet another great example. We came into this market 15 years back. We started our operations in this part of the world about 9 to 10 years back. And the first fundamental pushback was, firewall? We don't need firewalls. There are enough of firewalls in this market. Fast forward to where we are today, radical change. And I'm not saying it happened because of a couple of individuals. It just happened because the company believed in it, it hired the right people, it empowered the right people, it brought in the culture to drive that. And I always tell this to my friends and colleagues that one thing that keeps me going in this company, I'm the first 500 employees at Palo Alto Networks way back 9.5, 10 years. We have 14,000 employees today. What keeps me going over here is the culture that we seem to have built, that when we were in Sun, we had that same thing. Right? You are going to challenge the status quo. You are empowered to make things happen. You've got to be disruptive. And while you do all of these things, you need to build that culture by which everybody thinks about you as one team with one vision and one goal. And we are confident that somebody is looking after your back, because it's not about somebody failing and people jumping onto you. And I think these are some of the key learnings which really, bind us together and that really brings the best out of us. And again, things are never going to be easy, but then my fundamental philosophy with the team always has been, if things are going to be easy, why do they need the best people in the industry?
Thank you. So, I'm conscious of the time, and I think I'll just have the opportunity to ask one question. Now, I want you guys to think about the technology industry. And if you look at the participants of the technology industry, like technology, they actually have a shelf life of a banana. If you look at the gamut of the technology industry, you'll find that the oldest company is IBM. And after that, there are a couple of 50-year-olds, but most of them don't even make it for the first 30 years. And if you think about startups, the statistics are even lower. So there is something in this industry which makes their shelf life very, very, very low. One of the companies here represented, SAP, is a 50-year-old company, just celebrated its 50 years. And it's a single product company. I've known SAP for many years now, and it has one single-minded purpose, which is focused on enhancing the efficiency of very large enterprises across various industries. So question I have is to Kulmeet, is that SAP is one of the rare exceptions of a company which has a single-minded focus, in a sense, a single goal and an objective, but yet it has remained relevant to its customers and new customers for over 50 years. Can you share some of the
Yeah,
reasons?
thank you, Bhaskar. And yes, it's a big year for us. We are celebrating our Golden Jubilee globally, and in India we celebrated our Silver Jubilee a short while ago. But just to Bhaskar's point, and what I've always found is that whether it's companies or individuals, sometimes it's easier to get to the top, but it is so difficult to consistently remain there, which is the question that you're posing, sir. So, look, I could rattle off, I'm looking at the time, but I could go on for an hour. But if I was to look at the top 2 or 3 aspects why this is happening with SAP, number one, I think from our very inception, 1972, we focused on the biggest and the most complex problems that we need to solve for enterprises, large and small. So with the very first tech platform, all that while ago, that provides the seamless data flow mapped so brilliantly onto the complex business processes. And then we've gone deeper and deeper over the years into mapping out the industrial business processes. And today we've got across 26 industries is where we handhold enterprises, customers, as they digitize, as they transform digitally. So I think number one would be the relevance, and the problems that we are solving have always been some of the most complex problems for customers. The second thing that comes to mind, and I know Uni mentioned it, and I think Rajesh did, the ability to get back onto the drawing board time and again and to relook at ourselves within SAP or even as individuals, right? Are we still, that's okay, yeah. Are we still relevant enough? And I think that whole ability to get back and reinvent where needed, given what the market is wanting, given what the future is. And I think SAP has done that very well. So while it's a single product, like you mentioned, I think we've got a lot more comprehensive in our portfolio, whether it was through organic or inorganic measures, acquisitions, etc., today to provide. So that ability to harness the change that we are seeing coming up in the future, right, from an innovation perspective is what we end up doing well. And the last piece is the people piece. And I have to talk about it because having, like we described the journey, I think this is a company where we invest so much into people, right? And I was mentioning last night that I was myself amazed 2.5 years back when I saw people with 2.5 decades of experience, and not just in the R&D and product teams, engineering teams, but even in the sales, marketing, as you move up. So I think the manner in which the company continues to invest consistently into the people is one of the differentiators that keeps us. I'll pause. I know we are out of time, Bhaskar, but those are the top few thoughts, yeah?
Yeah, this is actually a fascinating subject about the shelf life or the life of technology companies. And I happen to work for one of them, Microsoft, my last role as chairman of Microsoft. And Microsoft nearly had a near-death experience. And it took a leader to actually transform the company to where it is today. So, I joined the company in the era of Steve Ballmer. I worked with him for about 3 years, and then the next 3 years was with Satya Nadella. And frankly, it was, when I first joined, Microsoft was considered a has-been. And today, it is the second most valuable company. And the reason I point this out is that because it shows how leaders can transform their companies. Leaders can transform their industry. And that is really the power of leadership. I wanted to thank everybody on the panel. I don't think we have time for any other questions. But I just want to summarize what I thought was some of the learnings. The role of any leader or CEO of a company is really to promote the success of the company and its objectives consistently. I think that's the key word, consistent performance, whether it's in growth or whether it is looking after the planet or whatever purpose or vision it has set for itself. And how do leaders do that? There are really two ways in which they focus on that. Number one is what I call collaborative engagement. Collaborative engagement is all the culture, the vision, the mission, the purpose of the company, and it's primarily focused on values and culture driven by leadership behaviors which enable people to do what they're supposed to do without anybody telling them what to do. It's amazing what culture can do, and I've seen that in all the different companies I work for, where people feel empowered, go out and do the right thing without even having to come back and ask for permission. So collaborative engagement is critical. It's what I call the glue of an organization. It binds the organization together. The second, which we didn't get very much chance to talk about, is execution. You can have the best collaborative engagement, but if you don't execute, you still won't get anywhere. And therefore, execution is critical. And all the systems and processes and the milestones and the strategies which you adopt are all part of that execution. Execution to a strategy is very, very, very critical. And we didn't get a time to talk about that. But in all the companies we worked, it was very clear that we had to have a set of goals and objectives. We had to have a set of strategy, and then we had to go out and execute. And execution is frankly one of the key skills which every one of these individuals have to make things happen. I'll close with just some gyan, and you've heard this from here. What is the role of a leader? There are three roles for a leader. Number one, a leader provides clarity. And you heard that yesterday also. In the times of uncertainty, what did the CEO of Palo Alto Networks tell his people? We create certainty for our employees so they can go out and make things happen. That's the power of clarity. And leaders provide clarity. Number two, leaders provide energy. They are the ones who enthuse the organization through culture, through various other different means, and empower them to go out and make things happen. So energy, leadership providing energy is very critical. And the last critical role of a leader is to make his people successful. You cannot have an organization where it is about yourself. It is about who you serve. And that is very, very critical. So clarity, energy, and making people successful, those are the three critical roles of a leader. With that, thank you very much for your patient hearing, and we hope that you've enjoyed the session. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir, for that power-packed panel discussion on power. And I would now like to request Mr. Pradipta Biswas, CFO of AVP Private Limited, to kindly come forward and present mementos to the moderator and speaker, and also to the panelists. Thank you very much, Mr. Bhaskar Pramanik. Mr. Kulmeet Bawa, thank you very much, sir. Mr. Anil Valluri, thank you, sir. Mr. Vishal Dhupar, thank you very much, sir. Mr. Rajesh Rege, thank you, sir. And Mr. KP Unnikrishnan, thank you very much, sir. And so if you can just stand in the middle, the photographers are all waiting to take a picture with all of you. Yeah. Mr. K.K. Mahapatra wants to... Yes.
I thought I'd take this opportunity, and also my CTO to moment. Thank you very much.
Thank you to the power panel. Thank you very much, sir. We request you to take your seats in the auditorium, and a huge round of applause for this panel on power. Thank you.